Elisa, you are live.
Thank you and welcome to the IWMF's Press Freedom Speaker Series, bringing you timely conversations at the intersection of journalism, gender equity, and diversity. This event is taking place with the support of the Washington Post Press Freedom Speaker Partnership. I'm Elisa Liz-Munoz, the Executive Director of the International Women's Media Foundation. We've been supporting women journalists around the globe for 30 years, providing programs, grants, and safety training to assure that their voices are heard and that they stay in the news industry. We could not be more honored to bring you the winners of this year's Anja Niedringhaus Courage and Photojournalism Award, named in honor of German AP photojournalist and 2005 IWMF Courage and Journalism Award winner Anja Niedringhaus. This is the 7th year of the award, which sadly marks the 7th year of Anja's murder in Afghanistan during her reporting there in 2014. Anja loved Afghanistan and covered it consistently with Kathy Gannon for more than a decade. This award was founded and is supported with the generous support of the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. Howard was deeply impressed by Anja's photography and her ability to find the intimate moments of humanity amid crisis, which is so evident in Anja's work. When Howard started this award, he told me that if there are people out there who want to shut women up, let's make it hard for them. The 3 women whose remarkable work we're presenting today will not be silenced. They're carrying on in Anja's footstep, taking on the most difficult assignments, and working in a field that is dominated by men. They have the added pressure of working as freelancers without the security and backing of major organizations. For these and many other reasons, we honor them and their work. We're thrilled to have with us this year's Courage and Photojournalism Award winner, Fatima Shbair, who is a freelance journalist working in Gaza City, and honorable mention Kiana Hayeri, who is back in Afghanistan where she's been reporting on the crisis there. We're also pleased to highlight the work of our additional honorable mention for the Anja Award, Adriana Zehbrauskas, who is a Brazilian photojournalist currently working from Phoenix, Arizona. Unfortunately, we're not sure if she's going to be with us today. She's trying very hard. She's in Haiti covering the recent abductions and the other events, and she's trying very hard to get to her hotel to be able to join us. In any event, we'll be very pleased to share with you her impressive work. We're so grateful for Susan Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of National Geographic, who's a career journalist herself and one of the IWMF's long-term partners and collaborators who will be moderating this conversation. We also welcome your comments in the chat box and encourage you to put questions in the Q&A box. And now I'll pass it on to Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elisa, and welcome everybody. I am so honored to be able to moderate this important conversation today among these incredible photojournalists. The work that they do is just heart-stopping, I think, as you will see, and we are very, very proud of them all. I want to thank also the International Women's Media Foundation for having this event. It is very important that these kinds of images that they get into the public and that they are supported in this way. You know, at National Geographic, photography has been at the heart of our storytelling for most of our 133-year history. And I think visual journalism, in fact, is more important than ever. As we all know, we're living in an era of distrust of media. And so the more that we can show and not just tell, I think the more powerfully we can show people what's really going on in the world and transmit these stories. So we're going to, without really any further ado, begin by having our honorees show some of their work, and we'll talk about it. And we're going to start, of course, with our winner, Fatima Shbair. Fatima, I think, why don't you say a few words, and I think we'll put your work on the screen.
Should I have my work through my, okay, like this. Okay, I will talk about the portfolio that I submitted for the award. You know, this year in Gaza, there was nothing more important than the last war to focus on, as after about 7 years of absence of the war in Gaza, and after people were close to forgetting its shape, The war came more intense this time, and it brought back all the painful memories. There is a new generation of 6 years old who saw the war for the first time. And this brings me the memories of the childhood. Um, you know, and it's unfortunate, to that children live with it to this day. I've always been a witness to what is happening as any citizen in the last war. I witnessed it with my photos, as it's the first war I documented. Many details, the nature of the bombing and bank targets, most of whom were children. Their names, their stories, and what they lived through during the war. All of this was not shown in the international media as required. It was all the job of photojournalists who risked their lives in the field for the truth and only the truth, where everything was worth seeing and hearing. And I have 4 pictures, I think.
Yes, and why don't you, let's go back to that first one, and maybe you could describe what has happened in this picture.
Okay. What about starting with the pictures, the picture with rockets?
This is yes, this is in Gaza City.
First.
With this is, hold on, I've just got to move something on my screen here. This is people inspecting the damage done after some Israeli raids in May of 2021.
It was, in early morning after violent targeting. We arrived in the town of Beit Hanun, and everything had changed. Its features as houses and residents inside were targeted. Dozens of people who by miracle, escaped from the fire after a tough night of targeting on the north of Gaza City, that shown on the picture with rockets, which is the 4th one.
Yes, let's go to the next one there. This is, I think this is a captivating picture, really. It is a very intimate moment. It is showing all of these children lighting candles.
This scene, shown after each war, where many of those who lost their homes are now living in the tents. They set up over their destroyed homes. And after the end of the war, they have to overcome everything and just continue their life in a way that forget everything what happened, and they are looking for their houses, everything gone, and just they have to forget everything and continue life. And somehow this is the scene after every war.
Yes, and let's look at the next one as well. And this is looking at the aftermath in central Gaza. We see a bombed out building and a woman in the foreground. Just a very, very strong documentary photo.
Yes, this picture, it was at the beginning of the war. People shake on their homes and relatives after a night of heavy bombing that mainly targeted the Al Jawhara Tower, one of the oldest buildings in Gaza, which includes dozens of press offices as well as residential apartments for civilians. It was a traumatic event for all of us. We all had great memories here. That was horrible, actually.
When we get to the Q&A, I'm going to want to ask you a little bit about what it's like being an insider, right? Documenting this, but let's look at the last photo. And this is showing the rockets.
The rockets, yes.
Rockets launched towards Israel from northern Gaza.
That night it was a heavy attacks. It was violent on the northern areas of Gaza. It was between Hamas and Israel, go and back on the northern areas where my family's house is there. I was in the office with colleagues in the West watching everything from the top of the building. I was just feeling lost and anxious and just wondering what would happen next. It was like, you know, at a film and just watching your country being targeted, and it was, you know, horrible scene actually.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And we're going to come back and just talk a little more in a few minutes. I think our next photographer's work is on Adriana Zehbrauskas. Now, as Elisa mentioned, Adriana is in Haiti on assignment and isn't part of this just yet, but she hopefully will be able to join us later. So let's take a quick look at the photographs that she submitted. And this photograph just blows me away. She is actually, so this is in Honduras, and it's taken in 2017, and she is with members of a local street gang, and they're inside their safe house in a poor neighborhood in San Pedro Sula. What I find so striking about this picture is obviously Adriana has put herself in great jeopardy to take this kind of picture, and I hope she can join us later so we can ask her about that. The next picture that she has given us is from Phoenix, Arizona. This is taken on January 6th, 2021, and these two women are showing off their guns at a rally to protest the election results and support former President Donald Trump. And then finally, we're seeing a whole range of her work. This picture from Sao Paulo, Brazil. This is taken in April, earlier this year. And this is at a cemetery where these workers are carrying the coffin of a COVID-19 victim. You know, as we all know, Brazil has had one of the highest death rates from COVID. So we are seeing a huge range of work from really violent gang members to protest to the impact of COVID. And now we will be joined by Kiana Hayeri, who works often with us at National Geographic. And Kiana, why don't you take us through some of your photos?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So the first photo, these are actually a group of, it's kind of interesting to be looking back at these photos at such a historical time, but this is a group of high school students in Jawzjan in Shabaran, north of Afghanistan, who they came from districts that initially was taken by ISIS and then eventually changed hand and Taliban took over, but they banned girls from going to school. So these girls that are photographed had fled their districts with their families to come to the main city to be able to go to school. And this was a story we worked on in early May or maybe late April, so just a few months before the fall of Afghanistan. Next, and I will come back to this point. This photo is actually for, it was shot for an assignment for National Geographic, and I was looking into families who had been fractured between different sides of the war. So in northeast of Afghanistan, outside of Faizab, I met this family, Hafiza is her name, around 70. She had 4 sons given to different sides of the war. One son was a Talib commander, another one had joined a militia group fighting Taliban, and then 2 of them had joined ANA. And as we were discussing, she was talking about the pain she was experiencing, and she has an open sore. If you look at the photo closely, she has an open sore on her throat that cannot be, that hasn't healed, and the doctors had said it's from the grief, it's from the ongoing grief that it doesn't heal. And it says so much about it. I mean, this is a country with open wounds. This is a country that has been through the war for over 40 years now. And then the last photo.
No, just wait on this one for one more second. You know, Kiana, as you know, we think this is a very powerful picture, and it appears in the September issue of National Geographic in a story about Afghanistan that Kiana photographed for us, but it also appears in our January issue, which is the year in pictures, looking back at some of the most powerful photography from 2021. So thank you for being there to capture this image. I think it, as you say, it speaks volumes.
Thank you guys. And then the last photo, it was probably one of the most difficult and devastating stories that I covered. In May, I think it was May 8th or 9th, there was a triple explosion outside of a girls' school, high school. And right off the bat, I'm sorry, the number changed over the weeks, but I think over 100 students died in that attack, and then many, many more injured. And the scale of this incident was something that I will never forget. It was just when we went to the cemetery, which was on top of the hill, just like bodies were coming one after another. And these are bodies of like teenage girls from age between 12 to 17. And this photo was shot the day after the explosion, when the women were 2 days after the explosion. So the day after the explosion, they bury all these girls, and then the day after, it's the family, when the family come visit. And it's just I don't think, I mean, many of you guys may be mothers, but it's so painful to be standing above the grave of your child. And this is a feeling that I have about Afghanistan right now. It's like everything is lost, everything that has been achieved in the past 20 years, and we're all standing above it. I mean, those of us who have a connection to Afghanistan, we're just watching and grieving and mourning for what is lost.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'd love now to, talk with Fatima and Kiana just about the work, about how they go about it. But let me just start with a very basic question, and Fatima, maybe you can begin, which is, tell us how you became a photojournalist and why you decided to do that.
As I always say, growing up in a conflict zone is what made me a photographer. I was 3 years old when the second Intifada took place in Gaza, and 9 years when the government was divided, which later resulted in a harsh siege, and 4 wars in Gaza, where I spent all stages of my life in chaos, instability, and an uncertain future. It's the same situation that about 2 million citizens live in. I realized that the life here is different, and I had to find a way to tell what was happening. People's lives here are matter, and despite successive wars and tragedies, you find them digging deep in search for hope and life. I felt that it was my responsibility to convey their voice to the world, and to express the lives of 2 million besieged citizens through my photos, until I realized that all I do is about documenting my life and what I see daily. Documenting what you live is completely different from documenting other experience. Here you feel, think, have dozens of questions in your mind, cry inside, but in the end you must remain strong for the sake, for the image and the truth, and only the truth.
And so one day, just to follow up on that, so you just picked up a camera and started taking pictures? Because I know you didn't really train, you didn't come up as a photojournalist.
Sure, that's it.
Is that right?
Okay.
So one day you just did pick up a camera and start?
Of course, it was the way and the tool that I took to reach those people's stories to all the world.
Well, thank you.
As a photojournalist. Okay.
Kiana, maybe you can tell us how you got started as a photojournalist.
So I'm Iranian. I was born in Iran and partially grew up there. When I arrived in Canada as a teenager, I didn't speak a lot of English. And in school, I was taking all the art classes that was available plus English. And at the time, photography it felt right because I didn't have to speak in class, and I was doing well. So I was making friends through photography. So the camera really became this tool for me to connect to this environment that I didn't belong to. And I was in grade 11 or 12 when my teacher, who had supported me very much, showed me the work of a very young photographer, a photojournalist, Dominic Nar from East Timor. And that body of work, and then later his work from out of Lebanon, really shook my teenage world. And that's when I decided, this is what I want to do.
And so you just started doing it? I mean, what did you?
No,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, in Toronto, I didn't have, there was no photojournalism school. So I went to a photography university, like a BFA program, but I knew I wanted to do documentary. So I did everything that I could outside of university to get the skills that I need to. I did workshops with photographers, and I made my way to do what I do today. And then in last year of university, I did one big project, started by photographing my own friends, and then slowly built up a body of work on youth.
You know, I am curious, and I'd love to understand you all three of you really put yourselves in greatly perilous situations. You know, what do you weigh when somebody gives you an assignment, right? How do you ever think, no, this is just too dangerous, or where's that line, and how do you go about making that decision? And Fatima, maybe you could respond to that first.
For the assignments and the hard assignments, in fact, I go to it immediately, no matter how difficult it is. Perhaps this is how I learn in my life, by experience. If we continue to refuse, always will not gain experience and will remain trapped inside our fears. It may be a strange thing, but when I feel comfortable, it feels like a strange thing. I go straight for things that always get me in trouble, but I'm happy. How great it feels to overcome your difficulties. This is life and how it should be lived.
Maybe you could tell us about some of the precautions that you do take to stay safe in what is the middle of a battle zone, really?
Yes, in difficult situations, and when have an assignment that put you in trouble, or maybe it's hard, you have to take it. Do you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. That's it. This is the idea.
Kiana, talk about your thought process in accepting or deciding maybe not to take an assignment. Do you ever do that, not take one?
Oh, definitely. I don't take assignments for two different reasons. Either I don't see the value in the story, or against my moral, or against the way I see, or because of the risk it entails. And it's, once you start working in these environments, which is high risk, it's a process. You do risk assessment, right? You look at the potential risks, the gain and the loss, what could be done, and then the best way of. It's difficult when you live in this environment. To always make the right decision, because I always compare that to eating spicy food. The more spicy you eat, the more you lose your sense to spice, right? So you eat more and more, and then it could be too late. So it's important to have colleagues, peers, people that you trust in your circle to bounce it off of them. It's listen, I want to do this. What do you think? You have security management where you speak to them, they understand. And then at the end of the day, you make that call whether you want to do it or not. Now that I've grown up, looking back several years ago, I've done things that I won't do today because I think I was naive or stupid, or and And I openly talk about this, like there are days that I wake up and I'm paralyzed from fear of like whatever I have to do, right? But it's important, like once you get into it, you get over that fear and you get it done.
I think what you just said, though, is so important, that you've got this group of people that you can sort of like a kitchen cabinet, right? That you can bounce ideas off of, because sometimes it's hard for us, especially when we're in the middle of something or caught up in something, to really always, it's so important to get that outside feedback and to have somebody else's eyes on it and somebody else's heart and mind to try to help us sort through these hard decisions. You know, I know that Adriana is still trying to get here, but I wanted to ask also about how gender influences your work, both in perhaps the kinds of photographs you take, but as well as what it's like to be out in the field in some of these really difficult places as a woman. And Fatima, do you have some thoughts on that?
For me, I face a lot of criticism and disapproval when I go out on the field. Watching women holding camera is in itself a strange thing for people here, followed by a lot of sarcasm, rejection, and words like go back to your kitchen, or even the men's profession you took control of, and ethics, something like that. In fact, it's a big problem that the number of women photographers in Gaza is not compared to the numbers of males, as you are talking about only three women photographers compared to hundreds of male photographers in Gaza. The nature of society and people's thinking is what sows fear in the hearts of girls who want to work in this profession. This is the biggest problem that I always notice. For me, as long as there is a goal or a reason I seek to achieve, nothing will prevent me from it, as if all the difficulties are invisible to me. I do my work as if I was created for it and just for it. That's it.
You know, certainly that you've described in painful detail just now that some of the difficulties that women do face in the field, you know, the whole go back to your kitchen kind of attitude. But do you find, though, that perhaps being a woman in some of these situations gives you greater access?
Yes, it's a benefit. Maybe, you know, the women trust in us more than men and allow us to enter their homes and digging deep in their details and their life, and hearing from them more and more to reach their stories in a great way, that you are reached to the details that men cannot reach. This is the point, that you have benefits and at the same time you have difficulties from the society. And at the same time, I found it's more work for women more than men.
Kiana, I want to ask you really the same question, which is, you know, how you think your gender influences the work you produce and some of the things that make it both harder and perhaps advantageous.
Honestly, I mean, up until the fall of Afghanistan, it's to me, being a woman always have been an advantage. It's been, this is a term that I'm using. It's not my own term. I didn't come up with that. Once read in an article that in Middle East, foreign women are kind of like a third gender. And that's how I felt here, because I'm able to access the women's side of story. I'm able to like sit and wait and go into spaces that men are not allowed to. And before the fall, most of the spaces, like most of the assignments, like places that men could go, I could go as well, right? So it's been always great for me to be able to do that. However, with the fall, it was a very difficult decision for me. When Afghanistan fell, I left on that day. I got evacuated solely because nobody knew what was going to happen. And being a woman expose you to certain type of danger and threats that men would necessarily, they wouldn't deal with it, right? So that is like one thing that because of my gender, I decided to leave on the day. And then now that I've come back, it's honestly, it's way better than I thought. I thought everything that all these years worked to my advantage, being a woman, be looking like an Afghan and being able to speak the language. I thought all of that is going to work as a disadvantage, work against me. It's been much better than that, but still there are stories that when you deal with very extremist people, I don't think I will be able to do it because they won't accept you in their spaces.
Now, I know it's a little bit sensitive. I mean, when people ask me about being a female journalist and does it affect my approach to journalism, I always think it's kind of a dumb question, but because of course it does. But I would ask you, how do you think being a woman affects your approach to photography? Do you think you see differently? There's that phrase of female gaze. What do you think about that? Kiana.
Sorry, I thought that question is for. No, definitely it does. No, it impacts. I mean, this might be, I'm generalizing, but women have a lot more empathy, right, than men. And I rarely you see women that they can go up to like people and shove their camera in their faces, right? So you're softer. And yes, the way put a man and a woman in a situation and watch how they photograph and how they navigate this space, it's very different. So yeah, definitely it's impacted me. And I think on top of that, being a woman, it's your personal experiences that shapes you and shapes the way you look at the world and you interact with them.
What do you think, Fatima, about this idea of a female gaze when it comes to photography?
Excuse me? I can't hear the follow question, or maybe
I'm sorry.
I'm not focused.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What do you think about the idea that there's a female gaze for photographers so that women are really taking different kinds of pictures perhaps than men? Do you agree with that?
Yes, they have a specific, creative, and I find always that maybe they have something special in their photos. And I noticed that is this photo for a woman. When I take a first look for it, there's something different in photos for women more than the men. They have a specific creative, a specific look. So that's it.
I want to ask both of you what it feels like to, be honored in the name of Anja Niedringhaus, such a courageous and, famous photographer. Have you thought a lot about that?
As a female photographer, I have always tried to prove myself in the field, especially in a place like Gaza. Receiving the Annie Award today gave me strength and not to think about despair, wherever it may be. Annie has always taught us courage and diligence. I only know her through her photos. I wish I had met her. She's present with us every day with her pictures that always tell us how strong and beautiful she was. As photojournalists, we will always be the voice for all people, wherever they are, as Anya was. We are here every day to continue her journey and the path of all our colleagues we lost in the field. Peace to her soul and to the hearts of her family and everyone who loved her.
Kiana?
Yes, I mean, I moved to Afghanistan shortly after Anja was killed here. I moved here in November of 2014. And Anja belonged to a generation that a lot of us, the younger generation, looked up to her and to her work, right? And despite what I really always admired in her work was, even though she shot for Wire and she did a lot of like hardcore news, but there was always like a sensitivity and intimacy in her photos that you don't always see in Wire photography. And it's an honor, and it's an honor, but it's so ironic to be receiving this award this year, like in midst of everything.
Why do you think? Oh, look,
Adriana is here.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi. I'm sorry, guys.
No, I'm so overjoyed you
Fantastic.
could join us. Adriana,
Thank
I'm
you.
Susan Goldberg. It's so nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you too. I apologize for the delay, but
No,
I'm glad I
but
could make it.
we
halfway.
are glad. So you are in Haiti at particularly. I mean, obviously there are a lot of chaotic events that have happened in Haiti for a long time, but I think you're there at a particularly difficult time. Can you tell us what's going on there? Maybe you can just give us
Yeah.
some view from the ground.
Yes, sure. Actually, it's my third time in Haiti in the past couple of months. We were working on a different story, on a feature story, and we were up in north in the country when we had heard the news of the kidnapping of the missionaries, the American missionaries and the Canadian. So we had to abort our story and drive back down to Port-au-Prince. And so we've been working on this story, and it's a breaking news story, like, things are happening. And also on top of all that, there's been, this is the first day that activities have restarted after a 2-day of a general strike in the country because of, widespread violence, insecurity, food shortage. So it's been a very complicated moment here. Everything is difficult. Just to move around is complicated. There's no fuel, so it's a complicated time to be here. So yeah, we were just, we were waiting on a story yesterday and it didn't come through. So it happened today. And there are things that we do not control. And, but I'm glad at least I made it here to talk with you guys.
Well, we are truly glad too. And, we were talking, and I want to start with you about, the danger that all three of you really put yourselves in to take these very powerful pictures. One of your pictures that we talked about before you joined us was the picture from Honduras inside sort of this safe house for these gang members. I mean, that seems like you put yourself in incredible jeopardy to get this kind of photograph. Can you tell us, well, why you did that, and how much danger do you think you were in? Or should this be the kind of thing you'd say, I would never do that again?
I wish I could say I would never do that again, but I think I would. I think it was important to show because that's the story. It was not just, we wanted to show the gang. It was a story about migration. And it's a story, we were trying to understand the causes of migration and why Central Americans were fleeing their countries and putting themselves in even more danger, crossing the US and trying to get to the US, crossing Mexico, I'm sorry, and to try to get to the United States. So the whole idea was really to go and understand this root causes of why it's so dangerous at home that people would, don't even think twice about making this incredible, difficult and dangerous journey. So it was important for us to show that why these migrants are doing what they're doing. There is a serious cause, and nobody will leave their homes and their families if they could stay. So that was the main cause for doing that photograph. And yes, we kind of put ourselves in a difficult position because we were in their safe house, in their territory, and these are not the people that are very reliable. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was all very fast. It was getting dark very fast, so my light was going and going. So I was bumping the ISO of my camera, and it was like, I need to do this. And these people, they were super high on drugs, and but they let us be there, and that we tried to go back because we were not finished talking to them. The next day we came back, actually, we went back there and we waited for hours and they did not let us back in. So that was one shot that we got. And this is a little bit of what is going on here in Haiti too. The city, half of the city is basically controlled by gangs, and the missionaries were kidnapped by a gang called the 400 Mawozo. But here is a completely different story. We cannot even go near this, what they call this red zones. So I'm here on assignment for the New York Times, and it's been a really complicated story to follow. The Times has been being very careful. We have security on the ground with us, and I can only go where security vet us to go, and I can't leave the hotel by myself. So everything is very, very controlled. And as you know, it's whatever we can do that's not going to put the whole team in jeopardy or in danger.
I already asked the other two, and I just want to ask you one more question before we sort of all go back to it. Is so you're lucky that you've got security, and
Exactly.
what are, outside of having security, I mean, what are some of the things that you would recommend for staying safe on the ground, particularly as a female photographer?
Well, there's obviously, researching the place you're going. I always check with people at home, with my editors, if I'm in a situation or in a place that it's edgy or complicated. I'm always like on the phone trying to be on a safe location, at least a safe hotel where I know that at least I can go back to a safe place. Just doing all the training you can on safety, being aware, like totally aware of your surroundings is very important, and surrounding yourself with people that knows the place and will help you navigate and understand the culture, because sometimes it's just like one signal and it's a very cultural thing that we do not understand, but a local person understands and was like, okay, this is time to go. We have to leave now. And so, yes, and I always, as a woman, I try to be very serious, like the way I look when I'm about photographing, as though, I'm a very friendly person, but sometimes, that can be misinterpreted. So I really try to keep a straight face as much as I can, and and be very serious in how I relate to people, especially in the street. Obviously, it's different when I'm in an interview or someone's house, but in general, it's very important to. Oops, I think the energy went out. So the power went out. So okay, back on. So yeah, so being very, very attentive to details, also how you behave and how you deal with people.
That's very important advice, and I hope everybody watching has been taking notes before. These are really important tips. I wanted to ask all three of you about the sort of notion of intimacy. Taking a picture is such an intimate act. And, how do you think about that? For example, Fatima, you are photographing in a place well. I mean, you were photographing in your home, and there's a real intimacy to that. Do you think about that how that local knowledge really helps you?
Yes, in Gaza, in the end, this is my country, and I have a great background on the lives of people here, their way of thinking, what should happen and what should not. Despite society's rejection of female photographers here, there is also another aspect, as I said, that has advantages over males, where women host us in their homes, comfortably telling their stories, which enables us to dig deep into the details of their lives and serve their stories as required. Even different countries, it's important to study a lot about where you will work and understand them well. This will make them respect and trust you because you respected them first, and make your loyalty to serve people always and to deliver their messages, not only take your interest at their expense. This will be clear and make them trust you. this is the idea for me.
Thank you. You know, Kiana, when we were looking at your pictures, there was the close-up photograph of that older woman who had the sore and the sons, you know, who were caught up in the war. I mean, you're kind of like right there taking her picture, right? I mean, that's a different kind of intimacy, right? You were right up close. How do you handle those situations?
Like, how do I achieve that, or how do I?
Well,
What do you
I mean,
by?
I think I mean, how do you handle it emotionally, really?
Oh, emotionally. So I think most of the time at the time of shooting, the camera that is sitting between my eyes, like me and the subject, is shelters me, like gives me some. It's usually, it comes back and hunts me when I'm either editing the photos or days after, when it's like quiet time. So at the time when I'm shooting, because my brain is multitasking, thinking about several things. How am I going to capture this? Like if it's like a other space, like the dangers that are coming, I don't have time to be impacted by what's happening in front of me right away. It's usually like in a car ride later, or when I'm I mean, this is something that I continue. I'm not sure if I'm doing a great job. I'm learning. I'm a better person than I was several years ago, and hopefully I will learn more how to handle these situations in a couple of years from now. But there are like all these like little techniques of like visualization, where like this, actually Bruce Shapiro taught me this. Like, you, before going out to cover these very difficult situations, is you imagine yourself wearing a yellow raincoat, something very bright, right? And then you imagine it. You go throughout, when you're in the field, you start like touching and feeling the raincoat, and then when you're coming home, before you enter the house, you take the coat out and you take everything. So you create a separation between what you just documented and your home, which is supposed to be a safe space. There are all these like little techniques.
That's very interesting. I don't know, Adriana, did you do anything like that?
No, I didn't know about the raincoat technique. I think it's a great thing. I'll probably use that. Thanks, Kiana, for sharing it. I think, but as Kiana said, during the moment, there's so much going on, and there's so much I have to think about, the technical details of the image, like how I'm going to, portray it, what's happening around me, I mean, there's so much, my mind is so full of things that it's really, I get shielded by that, and just this adrenaline. And there's one thing that I learned. I once was an assistant to James Knockway, and he told me, I remember we were on a very soft assignment, and I was back in Brazil, and he was doing a feature story on soccer because it was the World Cup. And we were in Rio de Janeiro, and we were crossing the street in Leblon, and there was nothing going on. It was just breakfast, and it was green for the cars, and he crossed, and I didn't go. I stepped back, and then I looked, and then he was on the other side, and he was looking at me like a little, annoyed. And I was like, what did I do? Yeah. And then I crossed the street, and he looked at me, he said, you do not hesitate. If you hesitate, you're dead. And that, it was something that kept with me. And also he said, you have to make adrenaline work for you and not against you. So in this kind of situations, like, I really try to channel all this energy into being super aware of what's going on and what are the needs for the story. Try to think about the big picture of why I'm here and why I'm doing this. And then, of course, it will come back, and it will come back, and we have dreams and or nightmares, or go cry, or the whole, flight back home or whatever. But in that moment, I think it's like I'm super aware of what I'm doing, and I need to do that in order to be able to do, what I came here or I was there to do, really.
Wow, that is incredible observation. I've got some amazing questions from our audience, and I thought I really wanted to ask you some and bring our audience really into this conversation. And one of the questions is this, and I hope all three of you can tell us, what has been the most moving or pivotal moment in your career so far, and why has this stuck with you? So Fatima, do you want to perhaps tackle that first?
It always just about maybe the scenes that I saw during the war at hospitals, at the fridges, at the people died in front of me, and most of them were children, and that stuck with me. Maybe during the war and after the war, I lived the scene again after the war and live with it again more and more. I be silent during the shooting, and after the war I live everything again and again. I maybe my dreams full of all of those details again. And when I pass by the buildings that destroyed, or the people who killed in front of me, I see everything again. I hear everything again. The trauma is still with us, even the war end.
But it sounds like that you've taken that trauma and tried to put that terrible energy really into your work. Is that a fair description?
For what? Okay. I can't hear the question well.
So you talked about this trauma and how it comes back to you, but it sounds like you've channeled that into going back out there to do the documentary work that you do.
Of course, everything matters to be documented. Every story have to be heard and documented. Wherever the trauma is so hard, but everything deserves. So here's the idea. Me as a photojournalist, I took the responsibility on my back for those people, and even it's hard, I have to do it. It's my life here, and if I don't do it, no one will know about what happened right there, or how the scene in the field looks like.
Thank you. Kiana, tell us a little bit about your most pivotal moment.
I mean, it's very, at this moment, if you had asked me that question several months ago, would have been different. But right now, it's very difficult for me to like detach myself from what has happened in Afghanistan. And I think the best compliment any journalist can get from doing their work is like when you do a work and it creates changes on the ground, it actually move people to like do things. And what happened was I was on assignment with the New York Times Magazine when Afghanistan fell, and then as we were getting evacuated out of Afghanistan, and the story came out a few days after the fall, and it was about the generation that was born after 9/11 here in Afghanistan. So they hadn't seen anything, everything. I mean, they were born after the invasion, so that's all they have seen. And when the story came out, even though it wasn't my favorite story because of all the how emotional I was at the time, a lot of people were moved by it, and a lot of people started reaching out to us, to editors, to like help, and they took some of these subjects out of the country. They provided like airplane like tickets, or so they got them out to safety, and not only the journalists but also like the fixers or colleagues that I work with, and that I think will stay with me for life.
Thank you for that. Adriana, I'd ask you the same question.
Well, I think, I mean, there are many situations, you know, big stories. I mean, it's not always big stories. There are emotional and are pivotal. There are small stories too. But I think one thing that really shook me was to cover, it's a coincidence that I'm here in Haiti, but it was to cover the earthquake back in, not this last one this year, but the one back in 2011, 2010. It was something that I don't cover wars, and it was something that I decided as a photojournalist, that was something that I did not want to do. It was not the path that I wanted to follow as a photojournalist. I did not want to be a war photographer. What I wanted to do was to focus on the conflict of, like after the war, and how people, deal with this. Of course, I'm a photojournalist. I do breaking news. I work for a newspaper, so I cover all these stories, like earthquakes. And coming to Haiti back then was arriving here in Port-au-Prince was something I would never forget, because it was really a scene out of a movie of the destruction, and it was the apocalypse. Really, it was like a destroyed city on fire, dead bodies everywhere, and it was a couple of weeks where it was really hard to work, but at the same time, that's when I met people when they were the most vulnerable, and they were the most dignified people I could ever meet. It was something that I could never forget. Like, I remember going to one of the displacement camps, and there was this people were in shacks and in tents, and there was this one little small tent, and then obviously you could see that the family was very, very simple, and they were inside, the mother and two children. There was this little girl. She was still hurt. It was like almost 2 weeks after the earthquake, and she was still hurt, and she had scratches on. And I asked her, it was a camp, and there was a big U.S. Hospital there that by the army had put there. And I said, you should take them. You should take her to the hospital. I mean, it's right. It was right there in the camp. Just for them to look at her and clean her up. And she said, well, but I don't have any clean clothes for her to take her to the hospital. That is how dignified they were. And I think that that stuck with me. I'm sorry, that stuck with me. And thinking about this dignity in moments of vulnerability became something that I now make it something that it's something that I really strive to portray people with, especially in moments like this. Never forget about dignity, and the strength that people have.
Well, I'm glad you shared that. I mean, it is, for all of us, it is such an honor to be able to tell other people's stories. And it's such a responsibility. So I just to end on a slightly lighter note, and then we've got one last question, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Elisa. But clearly you all have incredibly intense jobs. Very quickly, what do you do to decompress? And anybody jump in, who wants to go first?
I can go first. Last night,
okay.
I just opened my computer, Netflix, and watched Seinfeld until I fell asleep and had a few laughs. That's
excellent advice. Kiana, what do you do?
I cook. I love chopping. Is such a therapeutic process for me. I cook or make jams or whatever. I like doing those stuff.
That's what I do too. I chop up things very, very small. Okay, and Fatima, what do you do to decompress?
Just visiting the sea is the only outlet for us. Going to the sea all the day and every day, night and morning, and walking. That's it.
Well, thank you. Those are wonderful ways to try to deal with the difficult parts that you all do. But thank you so much for sharing your observations about your important work. And again, congratulations to all three of the honorees here. And thank you for doing what you do. And now let me turn this back over to Elisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for leading this important conversation, and congratulations again to you, Fatima, on winning the 2021 Anja Award. We also want to congratulate Kiana and Adriana on your honorable mention for your courageous and remarkable work, and we're so grateful for all of you for being with us today. Please mark your calendars. The IWMS banner program, the Courage and Journalism Awards, will be airing live at 5:30 p.m. on November 4th. There's a link in the chat for you to register, and I hope you'll join us there as well. Everybody have a terrific afternoon. We really look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.